Hello, class. Today we're going to have a mini lecture from Rosenstand's backyard because I don't have access to campus during these days of the pandemic. So, we're going to talk about Socrates and Plato's moral philosophy. And this ties in with chapter 4 as well as chapter 8. And you've already been introduced to Socrates and Plato in chapter 4 earlier. So I don't have to talk about who he was, who Socrates was, and how he never wrote anything, and how Plato is our main source of knowledge about who Socrates was, because that is something that you know already. But there's something that I need to outline for you because I think it'll be easier for you if you hear it from me rather than just reading it in the book. And this ties in with what it is that Socrates says to Glaucon in order to prove to Glaucon that he's wrong, that for one thing, and remember these points that Glaucon is making in Plato's Republic. Glaucon is making the point that society got started because people were tired of people preying on other people. And then they got together and they decided to create a society based on rules. And that is what we call a social contract theory. So that is the first point that Glaucon makes. Second point is everybody is selfish. Glaucon, of course, is playing the devil's advocate. There's no reason to believe that he is serious, but he wants Socrates to argue against him. So quite elegant. And Glaucon claims that everybody is selfish by nature, which makes him a psychological egoist, simply because he claims that everybody is selfish by nature. So, social contract theory, psychological egoism. But next, Glaucon says that if you're not selfish, then you're being stupid. And everybody ought to be selfish in order to take care of themselves. That means that he's also expressing ethical egoism. And at the end, Glaucon, of course, is going off on this strange idea that the selfish person has a better life than the unselfish person, and the selfish person will be able to fool people, whereas the unselfish person is going to be so good that nobody's going to believe him. They're going to accuse him of things he hasn't done, and eventually they're going to execute him. And that, of course, is Plato's very professional way as a writer of engaging his readers by saying, who was it? Who was that very good man who was not believed by the public? They thought that nobody could be that good. They accused him of crimes that he hadn't committed, and they executed him for it. That is, of course, Socrates himself. It's a brilliant piece of writing. So this is something that you know already from the module, but something that I want to emphasize is that Socrates had a moral philosophy, and it appears in several of Plato's books, so especially the early books. So we can be fairly certain that this is really Socrates talking. And I'm gonna I don't have access to our whiteboard at school, so I have my own. Whiteboard here. This is, of course, we're in lesson number 13 in Canvas, Socrates' moral philosophy. And I'm going to raise this so that you can see what's going on. I just want to explain it first, that what you have going on in the pyramid right below where it says the just man is my way of analyzing what it is that Socrates says. So there isn't any place in Plato's books where Socrates says, oh, I have a drawing of a pyramid and I want you to consider that as a depiction of my moral philosophy. No, this is something that Rosenstand is making up here, but it really works well. So if you take a look, okay, what can I do here? Yeah, oh, there we go, yes. Here is the pyramid that depicts Socrates' philosophy of the just man, or a good person, a person in balance. That's why I picked the pyramid, because the pyramid is a very stable structure. Reason is the smallest part, but it is the most important part. We are supposed to let our reason control our willpower, and with the help of reason, willpower will be able to control our desires or appetites. And we are supposed to have those controlled at all times. So there's no such thing as letting our desires loose on a Saturday night. No, we have to be in control of our feelings, our desires, our appetites at all times. Our willpower, or as he calls it elsewhere, our passions, will help us do that, but the whole thing is to be guided by reason. And I could say a lot more about that, and I do it in class sessions, but we don't have time for this. I'm making this into a really small lecture. Okay, so the figure over on your right is something that I was inspired to do because Socrates says to Glaucon, imagine if somebody lets their desires run their life. Then life will be completely upside down for them. And I thought, oh, let's put the pyramid on its tip. Because if you've got reason at the bottom and you got desires at the top, desires controlling a person's life, then that life will be very wobbly, very unstable. And it's the stability of the just man's or the just person's controlled life that is so attractive to Socrates. So, this is how we can imagine that life might be if we let our desires run our life. Very unstable. And here I have a cute story for you, because one of my students, and this is years ago, one of my students, I did this on the board, and you have a picture of that board in the module. Um, I talked about this, and a student raised her hand and she said, I know how to make this unjust person who's out of balance, I know how to make that image stable. And I said, fine, what would you do? And she said, can I come up and draw it? And I said, sure, go ahead. And this is what she did. Okay, so I'll have to sit down and I'll have to do it for you. This is just genius. Okay, so what she did was this. Can we get it over here? Yes. Can you see what I did? I made it spin. Turned it into a top. And of course, a top stays stable for a long period of time. And what I like about that is that it's even an image of putting, like this, putting a spin on a situation, which the so-called unjust man or the bad guy would be good at in Glaucon's little speech against Socrates. But of course, even a top has to come down at some point. But it's just a great way to illustrate what is the extent of the possibilities for a person who thinks that they can get away with being selfish all the time. Yes, they can for the longest time, but not forever. Okay, so it's really in Socrates' spirit. And when we get to chapter 8, you're going to see this image expanded into Plato's political philosophy. So we're going to use this image again, and I'm planning on making a video that will illustrate that for you. Okay, see you online.